So I'm going to show you how to get two of my favorite MCPs set up. And the two are ref.tools and the other one's called exa.ai. And the reason why I like ref.tools compared to every other MCP that you could use to search for documentation is context rot. So that's when the LLMs start getting really dumb as soon as they try to help you out with information. And if you don't know, whenever you're using a language model, there's a cutoff date for all the data that they've trained so far. And so that's why I choose these two different MCP servers, because they're the most efficient. If you've ever used any other MCP server, all of a sudden you're going to start slamming in a whole bunch of tokens from documentation. I used to do that before. I used to use up almost 100K tokens, just feeding in tons of documentation for the new AI SDK, my authentication, my database provider, all these extra rules. But the LLMs actually operate the best when they have just the right information for just the right specific task. And so in comes ref.tools. So this actually provides the actual context that's needed for these agents. And the way that it works is it'll grab public documentation and any private documentation that you also give it as well, PDFs, GitHub repos, any other sites. It will create them and indexes and actually make them available in Claude Code, in Droid, in Codex, in Cursor, and those are the four that we're going to go ahead and cover today as far as trying to get this installed for us to make it work. A lot of times when you're doing tool calling, what ends up happening is that there's going to be multiple requests and multiple steps that happen along the way. And ref.tools is kind of made for this agentic search, so it doesn't kill your context window. So this combined with the other one called exa.ai, this actually has a really high quality fast search for specifically coding tasks. And if you combine these two together, you're going to be cooking. And I have shipped features starting in plan mode using these two MCP servers to help gather the right context. And by the time it's writing the code, it's almost like as if I hired several developers to read the documentation and implement the code for us. How do we go ahead and configure them? So in ref.tools, they actually make it really easy for you. All you do is just go ahead and, once you've already created an account, you just go to MCP, and in Claude Code, all we're going to do is install it via command line. So this API key here is what you're going to actually put into this command. So once you hit copy, we're going to open the terminal now. And then I'm just going to go ahead and just paste this in here. Now it says added the MCP server with ref, and it has a local config headers of this. And so this means that the actual API key is here. And I think it's going to be able to do that. So now if I run Claude and I run /MCP, it's going to try to connect. And now we actually have the ref.tools actually connected for us. And we have to like quit an existing session like we did and try to log in again. And so you'll see it available once you do Claude MCP space list. So because it's in my root user, it's going to be available to any new project I start. So don't be afraid if you add this in. You don't have to keep adding this into every project. You just have to add it in once. And once you add it in here, you're pretty much good to go. By the way, if you notice, we actually have the API key currently in the MCP server. You typically don't want to check those types of things into your project as code because that's going to be available to everyone. So if you have the repo that's public, anyone who clones that can use your specific key and eat up all your credits as an FYI. So the next one we want to go ahead and get configured is called exa. The command they give us is Claude MCP add exa, and then the same with our API key. So what we're going to go ahead and do is just hit copy here. And then I'm going to go back to Claude Code in the terminal here. And what we want to do is just go ahead and replace this thing called here. It says your API key. And so in this section here, what we do is just going to go ahead and delete. And then I'm going to grab the API key from the following API dashboard. If you've not generated a key, you can go into here and create a new key. So we can create one called Claude Code YOLO Bro. And let's go ahead and create the key. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy this one. And then I'm going to go over into my terminal now, and then I'm just going to go ahead and paste that key there. I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter. It's going to go ahead. It's now added the MCP server with the following command to the local config. And so now it's actually, the file that's modified is in my local folder here. So you may notice that it could take a while for it to connect, and you can always just do Claude MCP list. And that'll basically show you what's actually currently active and available as far as MCP servers. So Haiku has just come out. It's the 4.5 model, supposed to act really fast. And why don't we just try using the latest model for a task that I'm trying to do? And in this case, we're basically just going to ask the model to see if it can use the latest Tailwind v4 and search through our code base. My code base isn't really fully utilizing the power of Tailwind v4. And I want you to take a look at my code at all the different places, because I think I have a lot of stuff that I've hard coded in for Tailwind v3, and I need it to be all unified. So we're taking advantage of the new Tailwind v4 system. I want you to use ref and use exa MCPs first to read through the documentation to understand how this type of system works, as well as reading through all the different parts of my code to understand the current design system. And we should be using Tailwind v4 along with ShadCN. So right now we're basically having Claude Code look through my entire app. And if you don't know what my app currently does, it's called Anime Leak. It allows you to upload an image, any real image of the real world, and you'll actually start to see like basically anime start leaking into the photo, which is kind of fun. So you can see me right here with my sandwich got replaced with this nice hand-drawn kind of really whimsical type of thing. So in here, you can kind of see all the different generations I've had, and then it lets you like share them with friends and so forth. In my original actual design, everything was in light mode. And since I forked this project from my friend Mickey, who currently works over at Convex, it was in this specific color theme. So the landing page, as you can see, is kind of a little bit more dark theme, and it has these different types of things that are going on. And we want to have more of like a consistency for design hierarchy and everything here. So right now, Claude Code is actually searching through and it's going to try to understand the code base fully. Now it's researching Tailwind design systems. And I don't know if it's actually fully utilizing the MCPs here. So now it's actually saying, yes, I want to use these different tools now to use the ref documentation. So the query it's going to do is Tailwind v4 CSS variables, design tokens, customization. And yes, and don't ask again for this MCP. And the reason why I'm thinking Haiku is the right thing for this type of task is one, it's a lot cheaper. And for this type of task, I don't need a lot of intelligence. I just need a lot of work to be done. And so by handing this off to an agentic model like this, it's going to be able to gather a lot of research in one side of it, but also look through the code and look for specific patterns of things, which is what I want to do. And then the utilizing of these MCPs will keep the documentation very light, but grab enough information that it needs to know to do this type of pattern matching, which is going to be really awesome here. So while that's going, what I'm going to go ahead and do is pull this up in Cursor and kind of show you how I configured those there. We're going to go to this little gear here, and they have actually dedicated tools and MCPs. If you scroll down, these are all the MCP servers I have connected. You can just hit add custom MCP server. And this is a JSON file that actually has everything configured here. And what you'll want to go ahead and do is you'll go to the website where it says use ref, and they're going to give you this exact thing to paste into Cursor. Add the cursor in one click. And if we go into here, it's actually going to say, do you want to install the MCP servers? And you see ref mentioned here with the following URL and the API key. So this already has the API baked in, and you hit install. Once you hit install, it's going to actually show up just like it does here. Pretty simple. It's really nice. So we're going to basically do the same thing with exa. If we go back to exa and we go to the dashboard and we go to exa MCP. So the values that we want to grab is going to be this one here. See exa, and then has this little bracket here and this bracket here. This is really, really important because at the higher level, which is MCP servers, that's your collection of all of your MCP servers. So we just get this value just like that. And you see that there's an additional thing that's added to my specific MCP server, which is this thing here. It's the exa API key equals. And this is the part where you want to grab that API key from exa and then put it into this last section here. And so when you open your project, you just make sure the toggle on and this is green, and that means you're pretty much good to go. And I'm going to give the agent the same type of task to use the same MCP service as well. I'm just going to copy this exact actual prompt and put this inside the cursor so that we can kind of see them both kind of cook right here. So now what we can do as well is we can put the agent into plan mode. So what happens in plan mode is no code gets written, but then we'll have all this analysis done and we'll have MCPs be able to be utilized inside of cursor. And so cursor is going to do all the work for us, which is really nice. If I do Command E, this is going to pop up a dedicated specific window for our agents so that we can do this type of planning. Now we get a straight up dedicated window to watch the agent really work. And to me, this is like a really nice way to work. As you can kind of see, it's a little more spread out. And as we are going to start modifying files or working with anything in the code base, we have what I feel like is a much more elegant view, all self-contained in one type of thing. So to get to this agent window, you have to hit Command E, and you may have to enable it in the settings as well. So as you can kind of see, it's narrowing down the scope as it discovers information to make sure that everything is the latest information and is up to date. And so this is a lot more efficient than web search after web search after web search. sometimes they'll run a parallel tool call to do a lot of web search, and then you'll start to flood the context window. And a lot of times these, agents will have to start pruning information. And sometimes you can have really relevant information pruned out. And that's why I prefer these two MCPs. One of my favorite things about Cursor is how fast it is at gathering context and information throughout my file system. Because if we go back to Claude Code right now, while it's still running in the terminal, it is still running all these different tasks. We're still on the research side, and you can see all the different tool calls it's been doing to get all the relevant information that it needs for this task. And it takes a little while, right? So it's now auditing the current code base for hard-coded values, create a comprehensive design token system in globals.css. But this is actually kind of already giving us a plan here. So I have a comprehensive understanding. Let me update the to-do list and create a detailed implementation plan. So it actually created a plan for us without me actually asking for it, which is really nice, right? So this is my current state. My global CSS is already using Tailwind v4 correctly. However, there are opportunities to expand and unify the system. Because as you vibe code stuff, the agents are going to prefer what's in their training set. So they're going to dump in a bunch of v3 type of systems, but here's the gaps to address. So there's like missing semantic tokens, hard-coded values are scattered, magic numbers and components, and all this kind of stuff that we probably don't want. So there's a couple phases that it wants to do here. So it's like a unified design system starts here, phase 2 to extract the component tokens, and then 3 is to fix the hard-code values, and then 4 is to create a Tailwind config for advanced customization, which is going to be really nice. So now it's asking me, would you like me to proceed with implementing this plan? I recommend we start with phase 1. I should be able to look at /context, and we're going to get a visualization right now of how our context is being used. So as of now, with these tool calls, you can kind of see it only used like less than 1,000 tokens for all these different tool calls, which is amazing. So our MCP servers and tool calls only use a total of 2,800 tokens, which is only 1.4% of the context window. And you can see the value in just these two MCPs alone on a refactoring task, which requires touching a lot of files, reading them in, and doing this type of comparison work. I'm super impressed with this type of system, and I've found extremely good consistency combining the two. And let's just go ahead and check and see what Cursor's doing. I mean, Cursor probably finished way earlier, and you can see the token efficiency in Cursor. He used 98,000 tokens. So one of the cool things about Cursor's plan mode, which is what we didn't really compare here in Claude Code, is the fact that it's now asking me a couple more questions, like, should we handle semantic scope of brand colors and then the cream background? But the last thing we want to go ahead and get set up here is getting this set up probably in Codex, and also getting this set up in Droid Factory. So for Codex, we're just going to go ahead and go to what the instructions say for Codex. So in use ref here, they have like any MCP client. So you can say find your MCP client for use ref, and we can say Codex here, and they'll say Codex CLI. So in Codex CLI, they give us the actual documentation reference here. And so for here, it says Codex is configured in a config.toml. So if I go to terminal and I just open up a new tab, Codex MCP list. And we can see I currently have Playwright installed. So I don't currently have the exa one installed. What I can do is I usually just copy this here and then go back to my terminal. You can even do this in Cursor. It's probably just easier to just open up the terminal in Cursor. So just in here, just type in cursor, and then hit this. And this is actually going to take us exactly to where this specific file is in our file system. So this one says to enable ref, update your toml to include this. We're just going to copy this. We're going to go back into Cursor. I'm going to paste. And we still need to put our API key here from the use ref. So since we already had it configured in Cursor, what I'm going to go ahead and do is just scroll down to where it says Tools MCP here on the side. And then I'm going to go to ref and hit this little pencil. And so the pencil will already have ref listed with our API key. I'm going to copy this API key. And then in here, where it says config.toml, where we're at, I'm just going to go ahead and just delete this here and then paste it in here. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And then now we should have it currently saved. So if I type in Codex MCP list, we should now be able to see that the MCP server is currently configured in here. So use ref MCP to look up the latest on Tailwind v4 and see if there are any gaps in my implementation. Okay, so we're just gonna hit enter. And so now it's gonna go ahead and send that task off and kind of do some research using the OpenAI Codex version. It's actually, you can see here, ref.ref research documentation. And this is actually now using the MCP that's built in. And so we're going to do the same thing for exa. And then we're going to go back into here where it says exa MCP. And then in here, we're going to just type in like Codex. I'm going to copy this URL. Since this already works inside of Cursor, we're just going to do the same thing and make it work inside of the config.toml for Codex. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is just paste this key right into here. So this is exactly the same key we had inside of Cursor. And you can kind of see with that little question mark, that's a little parameter that we're going to be passing in that shows the exa API key. I'm going to open up a new terminal window and I'm going to say Codex MCP list. And now we should be able to see the exa MCP currently listed and status is enabled. If I paste this in, and then I should be able to get some more prompts or something back saying, hey, it wants to use this MCP and I just should be able to give it some approval. So for the factory Droid, if you're using Droid as an agent, what you want to go ahead and do is kind of do something similar. Like I'm going to show you real quick. So it's called cursor and then /.factory. And it's going to be under /MCP JSON. So when I do that, what's going to happen now is now we have this specific thing opened up inside of Cursor. So this allows us to actually edit the file and save it all in one place, which is really, really nice. So all you have to do is get your configuration from Cursor. And if you were getting it from Cursor, all you do is go in here, hit Tools MCP, go into this section, and all you have to do is just literally copy this from this blue ref to here to this, including this little blue line in that. And then you go back over here where it says MCP factory JSON right up there. And then you just paste it right in there and you hit save. Once you have these two MCP servers, I think what's going to happen for your AI coding is that it's significantly going to get better. But you actually have to call them specifically saying use ref MCP and then use exa MCP or use exa code for MCP. And so the other pro tip that I want to give you before we kind of close out the video is the fact that you want to make sure that you use them in plan mode. So in any type of planning mode, you can usually hit Shift Tab once or twice. You'll see that all of these agents have like a spec mode, a planning mode of some sort. Make sure you use those specific keywords so that it gathers up all that specific context you want before you start writing code. This is first getting started. If you want to learn a little bit more, I do have a couple more spots that are open for my 1337 intensive. And so that's the elite if you don't understand what that means. And I can sit down with you for 30 minutes for 5 days in a row. And we're going to try to get either MCP server set up, your documentation workflow set up, maybe something that's kind of stopping you from getting the results that you want. And I've been doing this type of stuff for several years with AI coding. But as far as engineering, I used to work at Apple as an engineer, and I've been doing it for over a decade. And I have a lot of industry experience shipping software, having software that affects billions of people every single day. And if you're interested in that, feel free to check out the link in the description, obviously. And I want to leave you with this last thing. This AI coding thing is just starting to take off. And we've thrown the first pitch of many hundreds of pitches to go in this really long baseball game of AI. And I'm really excited for this era of AI coding because this is now unlocking a lot more capability. And the models of what we're doing today are just getting off the ground. And these type of tooling like the exa MCP and the use ref MCP, these are going to be really essential to keep the language model training data, like the intelligence of the models here and the training data that is currently missing. It's just going to pull that right in and try to use this type of logic. These tools are really magical now because now they're available 24/7 and they don't require bugging a senior engineer every single day. My name is Fernando, and I'm really excited to be with you, and I'll see you in the next live stream. Peace out, y'all.